Welcome to another episode of Paranormal the New Normal. I, as always, am your host, Jeremy, here to make things in life seem a little more normal. I can't do too much in this world, but I try. And my guest this week, I am very happy to have. We set this up back in May, which was when I saw the date and I was like, oh my God, but it works. We finally got you on and I'm happy about it. My guest is Parm Saggu, and did I say that right? Because I totally forgot to ask before we started.
Parm Saggu, yeah. You're good. You're good.
I was close. Parm owns a business where she teaches yoga to millennials and everybody else who wants to try it to help them get their lives in order. But I'll let her get more on that in a second. But first things first, how you doing? How you doing today, Parm?
I am great. Thank you so much for asking. It is such a beautiful day today. Yeah, it's a great day to have this conversation. I'm excited to see where it goes.
Me too. And yeah, compared to the last couple of days, it's a beautiful day today. So 100%, yes. Been nothing but rain and nastiness out here. I don't know about you, but so why don't you tell them first of all what it is you do actually, because you could put it in better words than I ever could.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, I do teach yoga. I teach yoga, breathwork, and meditation. But through these mediums, I help people find purpose and inner peace. So the yoga that I teach is not like yoga that's on the market currently. Like in the mass market, yoga is just to be fit, to lose weight, to stretch and to exercise and do those things. But those are very surface level things. So following the theme of this podcast, the things that I teach are much, much deeper, right? I teach the inner work. I help people do that inner work and release things, energetic blockages that they may have so that they can take those steps forward, right? I'm sure that you've heard that mindset is everything, but this is more than mindset, right? This is the science of consciousness. And that's what yoga is, right? In ancient days, yoga is this science of consciousness. I almost said was. Yoga was the science of consciousness, but it still is, right? It still is. That continuity is there. And so that's what I teach. I teach authentic yoga to help people find inner peace as well as purpose in life.
Which that right there says it all. Evening Waza, good to have you watching. And I will say that I myself have not done a day yoga in my life because I'm a bigger guy and bigger guys in yoga usually don't mix too well. We can't bend like that. But someday maybe someone will drag me to it. I've been I've been asked, but I'm just like, I don't. But I opening up the mindset and the all the inner yoga, I'm totally for that. Like that I can get with 100%. And I talk to a lot of psychics and mediums in my show as well, so I'm all about opening your mind and exploring what's possible, especially because, as I've been told and as I believe, we're in the middle of a spiritual awakening the last 5 years or so, and more people are looking to open their minds to. COVID was a big part of it because people had nothing to do at home a lot of the time, but even without that, people are still just trying to open their minds now and explore the world more and what they can are capable of. So, do you agree there's a spiritual awakening going on? I'd like to ask everybody that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are so many people who want something deeper, right? It's not just about making money and living that life anymore, right? It's more about purpose and creating a life that actually resonates with you because while what we see in movies might be appealing to some people, like again, it's very surface level, right? If you actually sit with yourself and ask yourself like will this really make me happy? The answer most likely is no. It's not going to make you happy, right? There are other things that will, and yoga, spirituality, and spiritual awakening is about approaching that space and listening to yourself and learning what will make you happy.
Exactly, and everybody should be as happy as they can be in their situation, whether they're millionaires or whether they're like me and live paycheck to paycheck. They should try to be happy in every situation they're in, and the fact that you help people find that is just an amazing thing. Like that, you could actually help them get to that level. I like to think I do that in my podcast, but I don't know. I'm not gonna blow my own horn there for like that. But so, ha- what do you recommend someone do to attain? like an inner peace, to find their peace?
So this is a great question. It's a great segue into yoga philosophy. So I'm going to dive right in here. The things that keep us away from inner peace are our own minds, right? The way that our mind works is that the way that your consciousness works is that it really collects everything. It's very sticky, right? If you would kind of use that term, right? Anything that you come into contact with, it sticks to the mind in some way, shape, or form. And that continues to be with you and affect your day-to-day life. It really affects every single part of your life, like your mindset, your perspective, the way that you perceive things, right? Your relationships, your interactions with others, the way that you treat yourself, like it affects everything, right? Your mind is your reality in some way, right? And so what prevents you from creating or feeling and experiencing inner peace is your mind, right? You can even say that, I love to give this analogy, right? This ocean analogy. Pardon the blur, you can't really see here. But, anyways, at the top of the ocean, at the surface, you have your body, right? Like there's so many layers of you, and your body and what you see around you is just the first layer, right? This is just the surface layer. And so that's at the surface. And the deeper in you go, the deeper into your mind, into your consciousness, the closer and closer you get to yourself, right? And that we'll say is the bottom of this ocean. And actually, this ocean doesn't have a bottom, it's infinite, right? And so you can imagine that you go deeper and deeper and you approach infinity, right? But in between the surface and that infinite bottom is the mind. And the mind is this incredible instrument. Don't get me wrong, it's an incredible instrument, but if you don't know how to manage it and how to handle it, then it can hold you back in so many ways, right? Like there's so many things, like little traumatic incidents as a child. And I say little and traumatic, they're kind of they don't really go together, but for a child, anything like an incident doesn't have to be massive for it to be traumatic, right? Like an embarrassment at school, or coming running out of class and like nobody's there to pick you up, like like any of these little things, like I mean, we perceive them to be little, but any of these things can be traumatic and they can stay with you throughout your lifetime. And actually, there's actually a lot more of that when you go into the theory of karma and all of that. And it's not a theory, actually. Karma is real. If you dive into the way that it works, you start to really understand that everything that happens to you happens for a reason. And I actually finished saying earlier today to someone that we come into this lifetime with like a slate of things that we need to go through to learn, and lessons, right? And these are our karmic lessons. That's why we find ourselves in certain situations. We find ourselves with certain people that may be challenging, and environments that really push our buttons. It's because there's a lesson we need to learn, right? And we're not going to be free from that until we can move past that. Those are the karmic lessons. And beneath every lesson, there is an imprint in your consciousness. I feel like I'm kind of going all over the place to make my point here, but there's an imprint in your consciousness. And once you can move through that outer situation, that inner situation also changes, right? And it's actually the other way around. Once you can overcome the inner situation, once you can address it and sit with it and release it, then everything that's happening on the surface will also kind of dissolve and move away, right? And that's kind of like, you can think of it as leveling up. You kind of move to the next stage of your life, right? The next thing and the next thing. And that's kind of, to bring it back to your question, how to create inner peace, like that's the process, right? You have to address all of these blockages inside you, like in between the surface and the bottom of the ocean, that are preventing you from experiencing that peace. Because this infinite depth down here, it is peace, right? Your nature is peace. But all of these things that have filled up our ocean are preventing us at the surface here from experiencing the depth of our being.
100%. I agree with all that. And welcome, Stephen. Thank you for watching. Excuse me. But let's go back to karma, because you did touch on that. And since a young age, I've been a believer in the idea of karma, because it just, to me, I mean, it doesn't always happen, I don't think, unfortunately, because there are a lot of people out there that deserve to get what they put out in the world, but they don't. They get away with it for years. So, but karma is just, I mean, it's one of the most ancient theories out there, is that dharma and karma, you get what you give, basically. And I've always tried to live my life a better way because of karma, because I know I don't want it to come kick me in the ass in a couple of days, but if I do something bad. But what are your philosophies on karma? Like, you obviously truly believe it exists, but like, how effective do you think it is in this world?
So karma, as I mentioned previously, is not a theory. It is the I would even, how would I even put this? It's like it's a law of the universe. And to really understand karma, you need to understand what life is, right? Life is not the space between birth and death, right? This space is a life, right? But when you look at karma, karma is this overarching journey of the soul, right? I mean, where you start from and where you end is not dependent on your lifetime, your single life. This lifetime, for example, me in this body is not this entire journey of karma. In this journey, there are little, like, you live thousands and thousands of lives, right? Like millions, actually, not just thousands, millions and millions of lifetimes you go through on this journey. And the journey is toward higher consciousness, right? It's a natural movement toward higher consciousness, right? Which is that infinite depth that we talked about. This is our nature, right? It's a journey to our true nature. And so karma is really just exactly as you said, right? Like what you put out comes back to you. Now, here's the interesting bit is that so if you think about, let me give you a practical example. When I was young, I used to think about, it doesn't really seem fair that I was born in Canada and I was born in a nice house with a family, like parents and brothers and all the comforts and whatever, where some people are born in like mud huts, literally, or some people are born on the streets. Like some people don't have all of that. Some people are born in countries that don't have that, or in countries where that's the norm. And so where is the justice? Right? I used to think about these things. And when I started to go down this path of yoga philosophy and all the things that they teach, I started to understand all of it. I started to understand the universal justice system. And the system is that whatever the state of your consciousness is at the end of one lifetime, that is what that determines your body, your situation, your parents, and your, that curriculum I talked about for your next lifetime, right? So karma is this overarching journey with multiple millions of lifetimes in it. Okay, so this is actually very deep knowledge, very, very deep knowledge that's not always really shared that much. So, I'm really glad that you're all paying attention here. Another thing that I will say that you mentioned that you kind of touched on is that, some people don't get the fruits of their actions, right? They behave in a what we would perceive to be a bad way or an evil way, and they don't get the repercussions. They do, right? But it's not always in a time frame that we can see, right? So now that you have this understanding that karma is this overarching journey, you know that, okay, it might not manifest right away. But the thing with karma is, if you think about different trees, right? You can have different seeds and some of them will sprout right away, and within months that you'll get fruit, right? Like vegetables, like, some of them you'll get fruit right away. Whereas other trees, they take their time to sprout, they take their time to grow, and when they're ready, it's not even every year, they'll give fruit, right? That is the same concept with karma. Different karmas, I'll touch back on your question. So different karmas, different fruits, right? Different seeds. So karma actually means action, right? In Sanskrit, the word means action. So any action that you're doing is a karma, right? Like you are sitting here listening to this conversation and I'm sitting here speaking, and this is my karma, right? And it's a karma that I'm doing, and it's a karma that is a fruit of a previous karma, right? And so what I mean by that is that at some point this seed was planted. You mentioned that we planted this seed maybe months ago, and then it grew and it grew and it grew, and now in September it has come to fruition into this podcast, right, into this recording. And so it's kind of the same thing, right? Any action that you put out into the universe, it slowly grows, and when the fruit is ready, that's when it falls, right? And so this is also why some people are born and they have to go through things like sexual abuse or emotional abuse, right? Some people go through all of these horrible, horrible things. And it is because at some point in their existence, in their soul's life, not just in their, 30, 40, 50, 60, whatever years of life now, they planted this seed and it is now coming to fruition. They must experience those things. And something that kind of goes on to this is that the things that happen around you, they do not determine your inner experience of life, right? Like something can break my heart, but can do nothing to the person next to me, right? And that's because those emotions exist inside of me. It's not that the event that's occurring has created those emotions. No, the event is triggering those emotions and allowing them to come up. It's giving them the opportunity to come up. And so, like that, the karma is stored inside of you in the form of a seed. Something happens and allows that fruit to fall, right? And to happen. And there's a lot more to this. There's ways to erase your karma, change your karma. There's different types of karma, but there's like so much to understand. Like it would take a while to really go through. So let me address this question. Do you believe?
Yeah, well, okay,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
go ahead if you go. No, go ahead. I was just gonna do the same thing you're doing, so go ahead.
Okay. Do you believe people have a choice to live another life and it's their choice to come back? So it depends on where you are in the cycle of karma, right? If you are done your karmas, like if you've lived through all of them and you're not accumulating more karma, so think of it as a bank, right? Like let's say, in this bank account, I have stored like so many things, right? So many good / bad things that I have done in my lifetimes that I need to receive, right? So if I have received all of them, then I'm done, right? Then I don't have to come back. Then I have the option. If I want to come back, I come back as a free being. This is what we call an enlightened person, right? A person that doesn't have any karma left. Whereas if you still have karma, then you have no choice. You have to come back. And the way that it works is that, yes, as you live, you accumulate karma, but there are ways that you can live without accumulating karma. And there's lots of things that you can do. And I don't necessarily want to get into that right now because I think it'll take a long time to go through. But this is something that, you can follow up with me and we can talk about more.
Yeah, well, as Waza asked, I actually was gonna because everything you were saying to me made me think of reincarnation and the idea of it. And not everybody believes in reincarnation. I know that from doing the show alone and just from knowing people, but I always thought it was a possibility because I just have heard so many stories of a little girl from India, a boy in the United States somewhere, and they've all had these famous stories where they knew parts of previous lives that they couldn't have known unless they lived that life. Like a 4-year-old boy is not going to know the details of a World War II fighter jet or World War I fighter jet, whatever it was, but it's just gonna like those stories just to me make me believe. So are you saying that reincarnation is 100% real?
Yes.
Which, and as you said, like, because I've had other people tell me that they think that they know because they talk to spirits that when you pass, there's like a waiting room, and you're basically sitting in a waiting room waiting to come back down, like almost waiting for your number to be pulled.
I'm not too sure about the particulars of how that works. I mean, I don't think that the universe needs a waiting room. I mean, of course, there's probably a time in between when you kind of find your next body, your next set of parents, your next set of situations. And I believe there is a rest period, right? I mean, in this lifetime, there's no real rest, right? Like you're constantly doing things, you get so tired, right? And so there is a time for you to rest, but then you have to come back. You have to come back and finish those karmas. And something that I hear a lot of my clients say, a lot of people who consider themselves as old souls, is that they're so tired. This is something that I myself experienced before I went through all of this, is that, yeah, everything would tire me. Like everything felt like a chore. Even eating, I'm like, oh my God, I have to go and chew so much. Then I have to sit and let my stomach digest. Then I have to clean this food. And then within a couple hours, I have to come back and prep and cook and eat again. Like, it's just everything is work, right? Something that even we consider to be pleasurable, eating, is also work. Like, everything in this lifetime is work. So yes, you need that time to rest. And that's why people feel tired, because they've been here so many times. They've done all these things. They've been there, done that. And it's like, okay, what is next? Like, when can I be free? When can I experience stillness and space? And when can I truly rest? That's what meditation is. Meditation is deep rest. Meditation is coming to the bottom of that ocean and resting, reposing there.
I never thought of it that way, but yeah, that does make sense. Because I mean, I'm one of those people who just always push off meditation, like, oh, I don't have time to really sit there. But I mean, lately, if I'm working on a podcast and I get stuck on something, I just sit there for a minute and I just think and like I that's kind of my own form of meditation, I guess. Because I mean, I just kind of rest for a minute and eventually something comes to my head and I start working again. But it's how I overcome the writer's block and all that whatnot. But you touched on something. Well, first of all, I forgot to ask this in the beginning of the show. What got you into this line of work? Because when you said your early life, that's what made me think of it. I'm like, oh yeah, I never asked that question because I usually ask everybody, like, what got them into this world, like this world of spirituality and paranormalness.
I would say it was exactly that feeling, right? That feeling of like, oh my God, is this all there is to life? Like, this is just miserable. Like, I am miserable. I remember feeling, yeah, everything was work. Nobody heard what I was saying. I felt like I was unseen and unheard, and like I wasn't making a difference in the world. And I wanted to do something impactful. I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to change lives. And I really felt like being an engineer, that's what I was previously. Being an engineer, I wouldn't be able to accomplish that. And so I actually didn't set out with the intention to, be here and teach others. I really wanted that freedom for myself. I wanted inner freedom for myself. And that's when I started practicing yoga. And when I quit my job, I committed to practicing every single day because it was the only thing that made sense to me. It was the only thing that made me feel like, okay, the world is not burning down around me, even though I just quit this job that I spent forever looking for and I finally got it. And I chose to be unemployed. Even though it was so scary, I chose that because I knew that, if I stayed in this job, there's no way that I could be happy. But if I don't, then there's a potential, right? This blank space doesn't have to be terrifying. It can also be a space full of potential and possibility. And so, I started practicing yoga. I committed to my practice, not just like here and there. It was like an every day before I do anything else, I'm practicing yoga. And that started a snowball, right? I did a breathwork workshop. I was invited to stay at an ashram. I met an enlightened master who became my guru. I did my 200-hour yoga TTC. And at some point along that line, in that journey, I realized how blessed I had been to experience that freedom, to have met this master to who completely changed my life, like in every single way. And I remember before I even met him, I remember sitting in this meditation hall. There's like thousands of people there, and they're all straining to see this man who was coming in, and I had no idea what to expect. I hadn't even heard of him at that point. And all of a sudden, it was like my heart just like cracked open, and I felt like, oh my goodness, I'm home. Like, this is the feeling that I have been searching for. Like, I literally looked everywhere. Western media, Western society will tell you so many different things. They'll tell you, okay, your job will make you happy, academia will make you happy, your family will make you happy, it may be drugs, sex, alcohol, whatever it may be. All of these things will bring you some sort of pleasure, some sort of long-lasting pleasure. And it doesn't, right? It's momentary, but at the end, it's just misery, right? Like, at the end, you feel like, oh my God, I shouldn't have done that. Or like, is this all there is? Or I need to do something. There's some sort of mental pressure. And so, having tried all of the things, I realized that there really is there's nothing in the world that can fill that void, that space in my heart. And when I met this master, actually, even before I met him, when I was just sitting there in that hall waiting for him to come in, I realized that this is the feeling that I had been looking for, that this was the home that I had been looking for. I felt like I had been searching for, I'm not like 60 years old, but I felt like I had been searching for decades and decades and decades for this man, for this being to bring me home. And I felt like I could finally put down my bags and rest. And at that moment, I just knew, right? I knew. And the more that I stayed on that path, the more that I practiced, the more that I do the things that, that he tells me, that he shares, the practices and all the things, I just realize how blessed I am to have been plucked out of the crowd and, put into this place. And I realized that I need to give back. There are so many people who are looking for this feeling, who are where I was, feeling that there is no point in life. Like there's no point in doing what they're doing. And everything is just like, as worthless, essentially. Like, what is really the point, right? We get up, we go to work, we eat, we go back to sleep, and we do it again and again and again, right? Like, this was really, that motivation started me on this path. And then meeting him and then realizing how blessed I'd been, I realized I have to give this back. I have to share what I learned. And so I started this company, Parm's Yoga, and the goal of this company is really to share what I gained, right? To share that inner freedom, that inner peace, that fulfillment in life, and just the absolute security of knowing that I'm taken care of and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and I am where I'm supposed to be. All of that.
Wow. I mean, that story right there, it's just touching, and actually inspirational as could be, because it just teaches people, if you're not truly happy where you are, even if you're in someplace great and even if you're making good money, even if you have a job you love, if you're not truly happy with it, find something that makes you happy. I mean, that's why I started podcasting. Honestly, it's because I wanted something that made me happy, and I'd looked for it for years, and I just eventually got invited to be on a podcast, and from there just blossomed and doing my own shows, and it just finally found my purpose in life, kind of. I think, at least. That could change tomorrow, though. Who knows? I mean, purposes can change in life, can they not?
I think there are a lot of facets to it and there are a lot of different parts, but your one goal, I mean, if your goal is to enlighten people, to raise them up, then that is the purpose, right? And the way that you do that can change. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I mean, you never know. I mean, you never know what tomorrow's going to bring necessarily, unless you truly can see the future. In which case, if you can, give me a call. I'll get you on my show. But because I'd love to talk to you. But what do you? Because well, all this talk about you can break free from, like, you cracked your heart and like found what your purpose was, and how we do that to our mind, though? Like, how do we crack our mind open to the? Because I mean, they say what we use 20% of our brain currently, if not less. We don't know what the rest of it really does yet.
Mhm.
Is there a way with yoga that people can kind of like figure out what other parts of their brain actually do, and actually release it?
Yeah. So I'm not too sure about that statistic and about using other parts of your brain. So approaching higher levels of consciousness, what that really means is cleaning out this. I'm going to come back to this analogy over and over again, right? Like this is a surface, right? This is where our body is. And I would consider everything physical that you can interact with is at the surface of this ocean, right? And that includes your brain, your food, your environment, your body, whatever, right? All the things. This is your core, right? This is your depth. This is who you are. And so what yoga helps you do is go from up here and really dive into this ocean and approach and become who you are. And so, yeah, there are definitely things that prevent you from embodying that fullest version of you, right? And then actually there's one thing, and that one thing is your mind. If your mind is constantly busy, right? If it's constantly thinking about the future or the past, or it's worried about something, or it's fantasizing about something, or it's caught up in daydreams or whatever it is, right? That is preventing you from living in your true potential, right? From living in the fullest expression of who you are. And so what yoga actually is, one of the ancient definitions is yoga chitta vritti nirodha. Yoga is subduing the modulations of the mind, right? Modulations being the tendencies or the activities of the mind, right? So it's subduing those so that the self can shine through, right? When all of these layers in between, there's actually 7 layers, they've been enumerated. So there's the body, the breath or the life force energy, the prana, the mind, the intellect, the memory, the ego, and then the self, right? So the self is this bottom layer, right? This infinite layer. It's untouchable, right? It's untouched by all of these things. It's timeless, it's beginningless, it's endless, it's infinite, right? That is yourself. That is you, right? And then all of these other layers that I mentioned, when they're out of harmony, that's when you don't feel like yourself, right? And if you're not in touch with this self at all, that's when you feel like you're just existing, you're not even living. And so what the practice of yoga does is by erasing all the things in between, it allows you to connect with yourself, right? With yourself, your space self, right? That self at the core of who you are. And it allows you to live in that, right? And there's a lot of things that come with that, right? Not only do you become more grounded and more centered, more stable, you become happier, you discover your purpose, right? You discover like the things that really bring you joy and what you want to do in this world, what you want to create, but it allows you to do that inner work, right? It creates inner peace, it creates inner freedom, stability, like all of those things. Instability is caused by the mind, right? Restlessness or laziness or heaviness or feverishness, all of these things are in the mind. They're not your nature, right? And so when you start to recognize that, then you can start to embody who you really are. And that, I would say, is activating the rest of your brain, right? If you want to put it that way, because usually our abilities, our intuitive abilities, are blocked by the mind. It's not just chemical. Of course, it is, things that you consume, because food has energy too, right? Your food affects you. Think about alcohol. What does alcohol do to you? If you drink too much, what does it do? And the same is true for all foods, right? Certain foods will promote, lightness and harmony and purity in your system, where others will promote restlessness and feverishness and anxiety, and others will promote heaviness and lethargy and like laziness, right? So you want to be very careful about what you put into your system as well. And that's a whole other there's so much information out there. There's so much wisdom and knowledge on that as well. So there's really a lot. And so by, living this lifestyle, right? Yoga is not just a practice, it's a lifestyle, a philosophy, and a science. By truly living that, that's when you can start to embody who you really are, right? To reconnect with, I know we talk about, you've mentioned many times, like you have psychics and all of these people come on your shows. These are just people who are more in touch with their intuition, right? And the way that you can get more in touch with your intuition is to start to live that lifestyle, right? Start to really, really live that lifestyle, right? In terms of food, diet, routine. It's really the unsexy things that will help you get there, right? And that's, going to bed on time. It's eating the right things at the right time. Doing the practices, doing that inner work. It's all of that. Jeremy?
Oh, sorry. Meditating for a second there. So, yes, but you said how you basically were saying like to do this, you need to break free from society and the pressures they put on you, and all like you got to break free from your job and your boss telling you have to have this done by then, this done by then. Your family wanting you to go to all these obligations, and wanting you to do this and do that with this person. I mean, how do you break free from all that? Like, what's the best way to escape society?
This is a really good question. So I would say it's definitely not about running away. It's about skillfully maneuvering the situation, right? The reason that we feel bogged down by these things, it's because of our minds, right? Stress is just your mind's inability to handle your situation, right? It's not that the situation actually is unmanageable. It is just your mind's inability to manage that situation. And so by working on your mind and your awareness, you can skillfully move through a situation, right? And that's really all it is. I mean, I'm going to give you a really concrete example. When I first graduated university, I took a year off, right? This was before I found that job and before I quit, before I went on this journey. I took a year off. I went to South America. You can imagine that my parents were not the most thrilled about letting their only daughter go to South America where she didn't know anyone and didn't speak the language or the
Yep.
culture and all of that stuff. So I just went anyways, right? I had two options at that point. I could have listened to them and thought, okay, well, my parents really don't want this, and like, take all that stress and pressure from my parents and my friends and university and all of that to find a job or to go into academia or to do all those things. Or I could have listened to what I wanted and taken that space and that time for myself, and I chose me. And I really think that is part of it. You have to choose yourself over and over and over again. You have to choose yourself, and you have to tell yourself that this is okay, right? Like, I need to fill my cup before I can fill other people's cups, right? It's just like in an airplane, right? You put your own mask on and then you can help others. Otherwise, how long will you be able to help them,
I
right?
love
And
that saying. I love that
yeah,
saying.
yeah, it's absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, you can't keep just doing everything for everybody else. You have to truly let yourself be happy first and be satisfied. Then you can start helping other people if you're able. Which,
Hmm.
I mean, and don't ever go outside your means to try to help someone unless you really can do it. Because I mean, I've been there, and it's not fun when you screw yourself over just to help make someone else move further on. Like, it's not fun. It'll just bring you down more in the end. But a little bit of warning there for people. But I did want to touch on it because you did say a little bit ago that you can erase karma, which I've never heard of that possibility, and that's just been in my head since then. Like, how?
Okay. Okay, I don't want to dive super deep into it, but I'm gonna talk a little bit about this. Okay, so there are three types of karma. And I forget the Sanskrit. Actually, I know that I know the names, but there are three types of karma that classify your karma based on the stage at where it is, right? So if you remember, I talked a little bit about this analogy, the seed analogy, right? When you do an action, it plants a seed. At some point, the seed will grow, and at some point, it will bear fruit, right? And so I like to think of these three stages as this, right? First is the seed stage, next is when it's growing, and the next is when it's ready to come, when the fruit is ready, right? When the fruit is ready, that means the action comes back to you, right? It comes back to you and it's ready to, I don't know, to be eaten, I guess. So if it's at the stage of a fruit, if this fruit is ready to fall, right? If your karma is ready, it's already coming back to you. There's nothing you can do about it. You have to go through it. But if it's at any of the other two stages, if it's just a seed or if it's just still growing, you can get rid of it, right? You can erase it. And if you are acting with full awareness at all times, you are no longer collecting karma, right? And then it has a lot to do with your intention, right? Like if I'm choosing to do something, right, like with full awareness, then it's not necessarily, I'm not going to say it's not entirely, but it's not necessarily collecting karma, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you're collecting karma at all times, right? At all times, everything that you do is planting some seed somewhere and it's going to come to fruition at some point, right? Karma is not only bad things, it's also good things, right? Good things that come to you are also your karma, right? You've earned that karma. Same with bad things. You have earned the bad things that come to you. They're not just random occurrences in time and space. They come for a reason and they come at a
Yes.
specific time. So the way that you can really start to erase this is with spiritual practices. So the practices that I do, they're yoga, it's breath work, it's meditation, right? And then what are you actually doing in meditation? So I mentioned this also earlier on, is that with meditation, you go from the surface and you're diving down into that ocean of who you are and reconnecting with that infinite self at the bottom there, right? In between, you have to go through your mind. Your karma is stored as information in your mind. You can think about it in that way. And so as you go down, you have to face your karmas, right? You cannot have deep meditations if you have a ton of things that your mind is always doing, right? Like that's also the state of your mind is also your karma, right? Everything is karma. I'm just gonna everything is karma. So if your mind is silent and still and peaceful and calm and centered, you most definitely have deep meditations, right? Like, I mean, if it's busy all the time, you're probably stuck at the stage where you're trying to meditate, but it's like a highway. There's just so much going on that you can't take a step in, right? As you start to work through that, you'll start to notice in your life that things start to happen, things start to change. And things start to change in your inner reality too. And that's actually you working through your karmas. And so even by just existing, your karma is being worked through. But the difference is that you're also collecting karma. So you're adding to the bank at the same time as, things are coming out of the bank. And so to speed up the burning process, the burning of old karmas, you do things like yoga, you do breath work, you do meditation, you can do chanting, you can do other spiritual practices. I don't do everything, right? You choose one thing and you do that one thing very, very well, right? And that is what will take you really, really deep. And by going deep, right, you're erasing your karmas, right? Because as you can imagine, the deeper you go, the deeper things that you'll hit. As you work through them, that's actually you erasing your karma. That's literally what it is. So that inner work that you're doing is you erasing your karma. So yoga, breath work,
Makes it
meditation.
makes sense. Makes sense. And you keep saying breath work, and I feel like I know what it is, but no one has ever really sat there and explained breath work to me. Like I mean, it may be as simple as it sounds. I don't think it would be, but is breath work actually a complicated thing, or is it literally just like focusing on how you're breathing?
So there are definitely techniques. I wouldn't just go on the internet and choose any technique and just do it, right? There are simple ones that you can, for like alternate nostril, even count breaths in, even count breaths out. But like, again, I wouldn't just go online and pick any random thing. Like, it's definitely more powerful when you learn from someone who's established in the practice, just because you're getting like their energy as well, right? Like I mentioned this also earlier today. I was talking about this, that yoga is transmitted, it's not taught, right? And when I say yoga, I don't just mean the physical practice. I mean, so yoga comes from the root word yuj, which is union, right? And that is the union of all of these layers, right? The body, the breath, and the mind. All of this would be the mind. When they come into union, that self shines through. So that's what yoga is, right? And so you want to learn any of those practices from someone who's established in that truth. Otherwise, like, what are you even learning, right? Like, I can only give what I have, right? If I have 5 Skittles, I can only give you 5 Skittles, right? And if someone doesn't have any, then they cannot pretend to give you anything. So what breathwork is you're working with your life force energy, right? So in Sanskrit, it's called pranayam. Prana is your life force energy, right? And this was the second layer, if you remember, I mentioned is your energy layer, your breath. It's actually your prana, right? And it's actually your life force energy, right? So beyond your body, that's where your prana moves. And your body actually has thousands and thousands of energy channels called nadis. This is where the energy moves. And if there are blockages, right, that's when you start to feel stiffness either in the body or in the mind, right? These are all blockages in prana. The prana is not flowing, so you feel stiffness, right? Some people have really tight hips or shoulders. Some people's shoulders are up here, right? And that's a blockage, right? That's stress. It's toxins stored in your energy channels. When you do breath work, when you do all of these techniques, you start to move that energy, right? When you do it right, you start to move that energy, you start to do that inner work, you start to release those toxins, right? And then those toxins is actually a little, it's simple but also complicated because those toxins also define your karma, right? Like if you're storing a trauma somewhere in your body, it shows up in that way, right? It shows up as stiffness in your body and your mind, but it is also karma, because that stiffness is going to make you behave in a certain way that's going to make your surroundings reflect something towards you, right? If you're mean to someone, they're going to be mean right back to you. And if that hurts you, you're going to store it in your system. That's going to make you be mean to the next person who's also going to be mean to you, and you're going to store that again. You see how that's kind of a vicious cycle? That's kind of what karma is, right? It's very simple, but it's also very complex. I don't try to understand or explain entirely, and I don't think that anybody can. It's very, very complex. But that's what breath work is. When you properly do the practices, you start to move those energies, you start to open up your body, you become more flexible. That's the physical benefit. But the real benefit is that you're freeing yourself, right? You're calming your mind, you're bringing your mind to stillness, and you're moving deeper into that space of your consciousness, reconnecting with who you are.
Yes, 100%. And it's kind of funny because what you just described is like the chain of yelling from How I Met Your Mother. But that's exactly what made me think of is the episode of that show where Neil Patrick Harris describes that chain. But wow, did I just lose my? Oh no, wait, no. God damn it! I just lost what I was going to ask. Oh, right. So you mentioned it that there are. So I had someone on here a couple weeks ago who she actually is like a guide to psychic services because she can identify. She helps people identify like what's a fake psychic who's just trying to rip you off and what's a real psychic who can help you. So is there the same difference in yoga instructors? Like, are there ones that are just there to take your money and rip you off versus actually teach you?
So I like to believe, maybe it's naive, but I like to believe that everyone has a good intention, that everyone is good at their very core. But as I said earlier, anyone can only give what they have, right? And so if that inner space is not clean and pure, then what they're transmitting is not clean and pure, right? I do believe that people set out with the intention to help people, but of course there are also others who just set out like they just want to do it because they like it, right? Like the intention makes all the difference, right? If you set out to teach yoga with the intention to help people lose weight, like that is a different energy than if I'm setting out with the intention to help bring you inner peace, right? Like that is very, very different. And so that's going to be reflected in my practice. And so in terms of identifying like what fits for you, what works for you, what resonates for you, it's really about your inner experience, right? And I don't like to go online and because everyone is going to have a different experience, a different opinion based on their inner reality, right? Remember, your mindset defines your perspective and your perception of things. I like to go and experience it myself. And when I do that, I can make the decision for myself, like, okay, yes, this resonated with me. This made me feel better than I felt before, or no, I don't really like this. I'm going to try something else. So it's really about, trusting that inner voice. And you know what? It can definitely change because I started out with commercial yoga. I started out with hot yoga in Canada. It's called Moksha Yoga. I think they changed their name to Modo Yoga. I also started out, there was an instructor who taught at my campus, but at some point I felt that this practice had taken me as far as it could take me. And so I went out and I started practicing on my own, right? I started to, move on my own and start to discover the messages that my body had for me, right? Like my particular like tensions and tightnesses in my body, the areas that I needed to work on. So yeah, I mean, it's good to go out and try things and experiment, and it's okay to let them go, right? Like, if one thing doesn't resonate with you, it doesn't mean that the entire practice won't resonate with you, right? Like, there are a ton of different instructors that you can try. And
Yeah. All right. So, yeah. I mean, so basically, what you're saying is that people can identify. You have to do it to really figure out what they can give you. You can't just go by their word always.
yeah, so one thing I want to add to that is that I know there's a lot of talk about like fake gurus and things like that. And again, that is a feeling, right? Someone can claim to be enlightened, but you will know based on how you feel with that person. So, like I mentioned in my story, like when I met this man, like before I had even met him, I felt that feeling inside me like, oh my goodness, I have been searching for this for lifetimes. I'm not going anywhere. Like, this is what I'm searching for. And I know that this is what I'm searching for, right? You're going to have these types of feelings. You're just going to know, right? You're gonna know. And that's what you need to trust. Not the reviews online, not everyone else's opinion, but your opinion, right? Your experience.
Exactly. I mean, sometimes we go into our situations ourselves. We can't rely on others to do it. Same as when I go to a restaurant, my wife wants to look at all the reviews online first. I'm like, let's just go and experience it. You can't go by what they're saying online. Like people like to make dramatic stories online just to get attention. Like that's the way it is. But all right, got I think I got one more question, then now probably wrap us up close to an hour at that point. But where do you think spirituality plays a role in science? Like, because I like to bring science into a lot of different paranormal aspects because science is a big thing to me. Like, I've always been scientifically minded. Like, that's always the way I worked. I'm an agnostic because I can't. There's no science to like gods to me, so I gotta try to think about everything that way. If you
I'm
get my drift.
actually so happy that you asked this question because this is what breathes life into my soul. I am a trained nanotechnology engineer. So what we studied was all very, very deep physics and science, very heavy science, right? Like I did research in multiple different labs. I studied like I have a degree in nanotechnology engineering and I worked in that as well. So going into this realm of spirituality, you can imagine my intellect was like, very careful with all of the concepts, very, very careful. But the more that I learned about it, the more that I saw that it is scientific. It is so scientific, like more so than actual science. Okay, now I'm going to explain that to you before you bite my head off. Okay, so one of the things that we really covered in my field was quantum mechanics, right? Because nanotechnology is what? It's a study of materials at the atomic scale. And so to really engineer something, you need to understand how it works from the ground up, right? So what we learned is that matter doesn't actually exist, right? Like this phone, if I was to take a microscope and like zoom way in and look at the atoms and even go even further, what I will find is that there's nothing there, right? Nothing, absolutely nothing. It's just energy. And to give you a concrete example, you can Google the double slit experiment. And what they do in a nutshell, what they do in this experiment is they have two slits and then they have a wall at the side, right? And they're throwing a laser or an electron beam. It's kind of the same thing, but so let's go with the example of an electron beam. So they're throwing an electron beam at these two slits, right? And what they find is that on the other side they have a pattern, a refraction pattern on the wall. So let me explain that a little bit. What you would expect is that because there's only two slits, you have two lines, right, of electrons or of light, whatever. The two are interchangeable. However, there were different patterns, right? And so this is your wave particle duality, right? We expect it to be a particle. We're throwing a particles multiple at these two slits, and somehow we're getting a pattern across this wall. And so what that tells you is that it switches between being a particle and being a wave. So it's a duality. And when you really look at it, I remember my quantum mechanics class, like he spent this whole class deriving the equation of an electron. And the conclusion we came to is that it is not really there, right? It's just energy, right? It's just this wave packet that moves in space like this. That's it. It just moves back and forth, right? And these different energies are just, they're different. Either they have higher energies or, different materials are just different combinations of these building blocks of nature. Okay, so that's what science tells us. Science tells us that fundamentally nothing exists, right? It's all just energy. Spirituality, if you go in the correct direction, will tell you the exact same thing. I've been reading this scripture. It's called a Yoga Vasishta, right? It's a talk. Essentially, it's a talk that was given thousands of years ago, excuse me, by a sage named Vasishta on yoga, right? On this union. And what he's been saying from the beginning, like every single page says it in different ways, is that nothing really exists. It's an illusion, right? And it's an appearance. And so the conclusion is that everything is energy, right? And so if you go into it deeper, right, there are different, so the Vedas are 4 texts, right? In the Hindu tradition, there are 4 texts called the Vedas. And in there's like just so much knowledge, so much wisdom. Like they've actually broken it down into so many smaller kind of like there's so much knowledge in there. It's impossible to go through in one lifetime. But what you start to really dive into is that, like, it's so scientific the way that it works. Even God, you can consider God to be a frequency. The only thing that really exists is consciousness. And consciousness is what? Consciousness is either it's an energy, right? It's just within that consciousness, there are these energies, right? And you can consider God to be this universal frequency that exists everywhere, and everything else to be these smaller frequencies, or different frequencies. I don't want to say smaller, but different frequencies, where God can be like the canvas for this painting of life, right? That's really all it is, right? The canvas on which this play happens. So the deeper that you go into science, into quantum mechanics, what you'll find is that, it starts to approach the realm of spirituality. The concepts that come up in science are the exact same. And a mature science will approach the concepts that are laid out in spirituality. It really, I don't want to say it, it proves it. I would actually put it the other way around. Like, spirituality is a very, very mature understanding of the universe, right? Like, I know there's a lot of woo-woo stuff going on right now, but like, if you go into like the deep, real spirituality, it's so grounded. Like, I wouldn't look at people who, first of all, you have to be super careful with who you talk with, because different people will tell you different things. But if you're getting information from a source that is grounded in this wisdom, like I said, you can only give what you have, then you'll know that you're on the right path, right? So science and spirituality, science is approaching spirituality. It's like that curve that just gets closer and closer and closer, right? That's what it is. The more that science matures, you'll start to see that it's saying the exact same things that spirituality is saying. There was actually a really beautiful, I don't remember it exactly, because it was part of a course that I did, the sacred geometry course, where it's interesting, because I thought I was going in for a spiritual course, but actually it was full of like science and mathematics, and there was like this tiny portion of spirituality. By the way, this is how this corresponds to this, and this old story that we think is mythology. Well, here are all of the concepts in that mythological story. Like, this is where they come from, right? This is what it actually means. And even like things that we consider to be different deities, right? They're just different energies. They're energies at a different frequency, right? Like, that's all it is, right?
Yeah.
If you look at it in the scientific perspective, I mean, it doesn't have to be like this. Like, you don't have to be crazy if you talk about God. You can just be a normal person, grounded in science and spirituality.
I mean, yeah, I get that. I'm slowly coming to realize it the more people I talk to. I'm slowly coming to realize that maybe I do believe there's something out there that's a higher power of some kind. I mean, I'd like to say it's freaking Odin or Zeus or something. I would, but because they have really cool stories and really disturbing stories in some points. But 100%, I would like to say it's something like that. But I'm still on my path of self discovery for spiritual awakening
Absolutely.
here. So it takes time. It takes time, but I've had a lot of people tell me a lot of different things, and certain parts of each thing clicks with me and makes me want to believe more and more. But I wow, this whole conversation has been so enlightening. It's been amazing because I haven't had a chance to talk to anyone who really does yoga or breath work or any of that type of stuff yet, and that's why I wanted to get you on the show, because I was like, that's something different I haven't had yet. So I definitely can't wait for people to hear this episode in the podcast version. And thank you to all those who watched. Definitely, we actually had a good amount of watchers today, and I'm very happy about that. Thank you, Parapost Network. But where can people find you if they want to? I mean, do you offer remote classes over Zoom or no?
Mm-hmm. So the way that I do it, so I've moved away from individual classes and I've moved into this coaching space. I also have online courses. So for anyone who wants to work with me, who wants to really dive deeper into this realm, then you can find me at parmsyoga.com. That's PARMS yoga.com. That's also my handle on Instagram. I'm super, super active on Instagram. You can ask me questions. You can go through my content there. I post a ton of stuff. I've tried to incorporate a lot of what I say into those posts, but Instagram is like super short form content, so it's hard to dive deep like we did here on those types of posts. But definitely subscribe to my newsletter and find me there. And I offer one-on-one coaching. So for people who want purpose, who want that deeper meaning, like I'll work with you one-on-one. And once or twice a year, I launch my course, which is kind of the same thing, but in a group environment, super high energy and transformative. Absolutely. I've been watching it. So it's amazing.
Perfect. I urge everyone to go check it out. And I will put the links in the show notes for sure so that everybody can just click on a link to get there. So
Awesome.
definitely would do that.
Oh,
And
and
as all my
sorry,
go
just to
ahead.
kind of
Go ahead.
so actually the link that I sent you in the show notes, that one you can actually leave in there, the one for the free yoga class. So that class is 30 minutes, it's pre-recorded, it's free, and it includes all the things that I mentioned. So the breath work, the meditation, and the yoga postures. So you can kind of get a taste of what to expect in the coaching that I offer and the services that I offer.
Okay. I'll be sure to include that as well. Definitely. As all my listeners know, you can find me on Facebook under the Paranormal the New Normal / Maniacal Music Musings podcast Facebook group. And we are now on Twitter as the handle's at Juggalo Bastard, but it's called the same thing as the Facebook group basically. And you could find us on TikTok as Juggalo Bastard Podcast, and you can find Paranormal the New Normal on YouTube. All my videos are uploaded there eventually. Most of them are on there at this point, except for the last few, but they'll be up there shortly this weekend. So please check them out. Watch the videos because I'm telling you, they're a lot more interesting when you can see the faces of the people when they're talking. It's a lot more interesting. So, 100%. But Parm, thank you for coming on. It's been an honor having you on. I will gladly say that. And we'll catch you next. Well, listeners, catch me next time. And please check out her website and everything if you're interested in her services because she offers some good stuff, I have a feeling.